episode is sponsored by Teamhood, a modern project management system.
So I think we can get started. And first of all, Gustav, thanks for being here with us on the Agile Couch. That's the name of our podcast series, or in Lithuanian it's Ant Agile Sofos. It's similar, sounds similar on the Agile Couch or on the Agile Sofa. Okay. But it's really nice to have you. I've been just in your, if I can call it a session about democracy, what is important in it, and what are the key principles of democracy. It was really interesting. You mentioned 3 things, if not mistaken.
Yes, exactly.
So one is autonomy, transparency,
yes.
and
alienation.
Yeah, that's a
bit the most
complicated word. Yeah. I wonder how you see, as you're an agile coach by yourself, I wonder how do you see democracy as a main, not as a main, but as a principle or as a mindset to have it working in teams, in organizations? What are the key, firstly, what are the key things that helps out while having democracy? And then what are the challenges if we have a democracy? Maybe there is sometimes that you can think of. Maybe to start with what is the benefits of how you see it?
Also the benefits of democracy, that's basically pretty simple, because what we have is that when you have a problem, it always makes more sense if you get all the perspectives on a certain topic, because then you can have a more informed decision. And the thing is that it was also was I talking in my, or what I was saying in my talk, is that you cannot just rely on experts. What often happens that you just ask the experts and they will tell you what you have to do, because we are in a complex environment, in a society, and an expert can never have the complete knowledge about what's going on. There's in Daniel Kahneman this example that he uses that ski accidents, so accidents by skiing, and the statistics have a very good understanding of the numbers, and they know how risky stuff is. But the people who are actually on the mountains, they have a much better understanding in terms of who is actually addressed by those accidents. So who are like the people who skis faster are more likely to have an accident. And this is common sense, of course, but in the counts, in the numbers, you don't see that. So the thing is, if you have all the perspectives and you get the quantitative, the qualitative, from the experts, from the different levels in the society or in an organization. So if you're like cross-functional teams, if you get insight from an UX designer, from a developer, from the operations, in the end the product you will create will be much more valuable and aligned to the user needs.
So the perspectives are different, where we can see in order to take the best decision, but not just to go fast by someone, the king with the crown who takes all the leads.
Exactly. And what happens is that when you put the people together, that something emerges, that people get a shared understanding, and then something new gets created which was not visible by any of the people on themselves. So I think that is also where a bit the magic happens and why democracy is very important.
Do you know what are the simple, easy to use tools? I know some of them that could empower democracy. Let's say within some kind of the system. Is it a team or is it a group, bigger group? What are the simple tools to use? Not forget that, hey, we need to be democratic, as it's helpful, it's a mindset. So what are the simple things that we could do?
When you start in your current situation and you want to be democratic, I think the first thing is listening. At least that's what I'm doing, is when I'm going into new teams, I don't judge them, because I often come and see, okay, there's the boss who decides everything, and it's not democratic. But that's actually not the thing. And it's when I tell in hierarchical companies that democracy is not about no hierarchy. It's about that people decide together, and if hierarchy makes sense, then a hierarchy makes sense, and then a boss can decide what is going on. But the thing is that actually every person is heard, and when he thinks that the hierarchy doesn't make sense or that the boss makes a wrong decision, that this is feedbacked into the system, and the people can, the system can react on it. So I think the most important thing is actually to listen to everyone.
Listen to everyone, or create a space where everyone could speak up.
Exactly.
In other words,
And creating the psychological safety, of course, because that's the next point. Because if people can speak up but they don't do, which often happens, especially in hierarchical companies.
Yeah, you might listen for others, but I mean, ask questions. The CTO might say or CEO,
exactly.
but no one will see any questions. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. What about the challenges? I'm curious if you've seen from your perspective, or what it is that you would see as a challenging part while having democracy as a mindset. Do you see any of these?
In practice, when companies try to go into democracy.
Or if I could share one, and I want to check on your opinion.
Yes, too. I had three already in mind.
Okay, please share them.
Okay. The first thing is that there's no real commitment from the C-level, so from the CEO or whoever leads the company, and from the investors, like in reinventing organization. I think it brings it valid on the point that it says those two people, two roles need to be behind the change, because otherwise it gets blocked at a certain level, and it leads to a lot of frustration.
Okay. C-level is not...
the leader of a system, whoever it is, whoever controls the system at the moment,
has not yet understood or buy-in the idea of it.
Exactly. And that even works for big companies. So when they start to really believe and understanding agile democracy, whatever, and they say, okay, we want to go there, then it will go there over time. It takes some time because people are used to. I had this term with institutions, so they are used to a certain behavior. They are still doing as they are always doing, and the change to behave differently takes some time. That's naturally, especially when you're not used to change. So. But it changed, and it can actually be very fast. I have also examples in mind with 1,000 people where they had a big change within 1 year. So they from a very traditional company to a pretty agile.
Okay, wow,
1 year,
that's a huge difference, step forward. I mean, within the amount of the size of the company.
Exactly. Yeah, and the second thing I had in mind was once a CEO came to me and asked me, he wants to get rid of, so he wants to go out of the company, and he wants to bring the company in a self-organized state. So really like holacracy or whatever.
Okay.
That was his idea, because he was working there for 15 years, but he didn't want to just go out. He still wanted to have some money, basically, because he built up the whole stuff, and of course it makes sense that he still gets something out of it. And I also just gave him the advice, just listen to the people and say that's your goal, make it transparent what you want, and then talk together how you go there, and they did. And I think most people, especially, so not the CEOs, but the people who work there, the employees, are underestimating the amount of change and the conflicts which will pop up as soon as the leadership is gone, or will go, phase out, whatever. Because the leader is usually holding a lot of stuff together, which the most employees are not aware of. And when they suddenly feel these problems and because like in this company, there was one person who was able to do 1 mail per day, and there was another person who did 20 mails per day. But they earned the same because they agreed on at the beginning.
And it's unfair then, one is working much more than other, getting the same salary.
So you drink all the time coffee, and I get the same money as you. What the fuck?
Okay.
And people were not aware completely at the beginning, but they said, everybody should earn the same money.
So the conflicts that might arise after the leader is leaving the team with your system, or allowing the system to self-organize for that, it's another side effect that you see.
Exactly.
How do you see the one probably very common thing that I'm noticing within the cross-functional teams, let's say self-organized teams? We all know that that's one of the things that's within Agile we really aiming to have. And I see that there is a challenge once the team needs to take a decision what to work on, how to agree on actions, and when everybody has a right to provide his or her own opinion, and once there are tons of different opinions, it's really hard to know so where to start, what to do.
Yeah.
So that kind of challenge of commitment to something, because each of us have different ideas. Our ideas are great. Would you comment on that?
Especially in a democracy, that's a huge thing, because of course there are different parties, and if you are, an IT developer,
Yeah.
you have completely different needs and seeing priorities than an, I don't know, a doctor in a hospital or a person who is working in a shop.
Yeah.
So they're very different needs, and the question is, how do you handle them? At the moment, it's like there's one leader who taking care of all of this and decides, but the people don't have to have to take care of the conflicts. There are two things. The first one is that I think it makes sense to be aware of priorities. So if I listen to the problems of a shopkeeper or listen to the problems of a doctor, then I have somehow empathy, then I understand that probably those problems are bigger than mine. At least most people I'm talking to, they are aware of that. They understand, okay, if they work 80 hours per day and do not sleep, but they still have to work with patients, that cannot be pretty smart. So it probably makes sense that I take a step back and give them some resources which we can provide as a society.
Okay.
So having this informed decision, which also popped up a lot of times in the talk. So this is going into just understanding of each other,
being empathic to what others feel, what other needs, and
having this creating room and listening, as we had at the beginning already. And the second thing is, as this is unrealistic. As I mean, if we would do this right now, society would get into chaos because people are not used to that and so on.
We don't know how to. And that's actually a good point of another thing that I wanted to mention. Probably just having democracy as a mindset without having any of the constraints isn't meaningful as well. Because as an example, taking any team or system, probably the team has some kind of, or system has some kind of agreements. So how do we work together? How do we take decisions?
Yep.
What are our values about the things that we do? And once I give an example, the team has many different options to choose from. Most likely, they have already some team agreements. As an example, we value empathy, we value focus, we value low cognitive load, as an example, or possibility to have that. And based on these different options, it's easy to map it out. Does it map to the values, for example, or does it map to the way that we have agreed to discuss things, to choose things? So put some kind of constraints. How do you see it? Is it meaningful to have such constraints while having democracy on top as a mindset?
It can definitely be. So I would say that the question for me, there's no necessity to have it.
No necessity.
If you have the democracy mindset, because the thing is with democracy, or what also Gustav is saying, is that you start with where you are right now. You have to accept that you have your history, you have your culture, and you are who you are at the moment. It doesn't mean that you have to be who you are right now. So that this is one of the biggest misunderstandings, in my opinion, that just because something is, it has to be like that. Because something, I don't know, because we use tables as we use tables.
It's called alien.
No, that's not alienation.
Okay.
That is meaning.
Okay.
How we understand the world. And we have, when we see a table, we have an understanding of what the table means. But it doesn't have to be like that, and children don't do that.
Oh, that's a very good example about children. I just was exactly thinking about that.
Yes.
The kid might pick it up or roll it, play with it, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a table to put things down on it.
Yes, and that's where we train or educate children, but actually we just train them into our culture. And that's okay, because our culture works. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. So
most likely.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, we have to accept that we are who we are and that it worked so far, that we cannot throw everything abroad. Because what he also says, that's pretty funny, we have the need to eat, to survive. So there were people in history, in the Roman Empire, there were monks in the desert who liked to starve to death. But it was not a very popular thing, and people extinct. So the cult doesn't work, right? Because it's not going with our nature. But it doesn't tell anything about what you should eat. So the behavior and the reality, there is no direct link. That's why science is not enough to tell us how we should behave. and that we should always be aware of. So how we behave is in our decision, and we can decide. We need to take into consideration what science says, and because it's in my opinion the most reliable source we have, but it's not the one thing.
Yeah.
So there's always a distinction. And what was the question?
I was asking, is it good to have democracy and constraints? But I think you answered that it's not necessary. It depends on the situation, and
Yes.
It might be that we have just democracy, and if we accept who we are, what we have, what we know already,
Exactly.
we might work on towards the future with the mindset of democracy.
What's the next best step?
Yeah.
That's the question I always ask. What's the next best step to make it smarter, to make it better? Because then you have new understanding, and then you can think again, okay, what is the next best action? And to bring in a position that we can act on it, for me, that's one of the key concepts of agility, agile, whatever, so that you work together and think about what makes sense. And you are able to act on that, and then you deliver.
You observe the situation within different angles, within democracy
Yes.
mindset.
Exactly.
Everyone is able to give perspective and opinion, ask questions, and then you ask what's the next step that we should take to act.
Exactly.
Nice. Could you please, as for the last thing, what would you recommend for our listeners or for everyone that if you would have a chat with any random people, what are the good ways to kick it off, the democracy as a mindset for yourself firstly and then for others? What are the first things you would recommend to try and do?
So, just thinking a moment about the fails, where people failed, I think the most important thing is to be in a group, in a society who works agile, who is agile, to experience the behavior, just to
Safe
experience
to
the
fail
culture.
environment, you mean like kind of?
No, that you be in an environment where people are agile democratic already.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you see how people behave, you can read a book or you can listen to YouTube talks or whatever, and that's nice, that helps you, but it's this thing in between which you don't get explicit, but you just see it, and when you're there, then you learn it immediately. So that's the thing. Be in an environment where you
To find an environment that
find
is
an environment
already and
exactly.
try to be part of it.
So even when you want to transform your company to a democratic company, the best thing I guess is to either bring people from outside in who have already this mindset, or to send people out
To see how does it
Yes.
look like if we
Yes.
want to be
in
there.
an agile environment for 1 year, come back and then support us in transforming the system.
That's really nice. Thank you, Gustav, very much for your time.
It was really nice. Thank you.
It was fun to chat with you and change opinions, thoughts.
Yes.
Thanks for sitting here on the Agile couch. Thanks for the nice speech here previously. And see you next time in other Agile Tour Vilnius, probably next year or the year
Hopefully. I really like actually the people here and this atmosphere.
Likewise.
Yes, it's really like, you have talks and chats with the people all the time, and it's really like you get new insights. They're smart. You're smart people.